Hello and welcome back to PTSD While Black. I'm Quinn. I live with PTSD, complex PTSD. There's been another mass shooting in Louisville, Kentucky. In this case, it was workplace violence versus a school shooting where someone shot up a bank where he worked. And it makes me think of when trauma is not addressed and people don't get the help that they need, how they can take it out on those around them. That's why it's so important for me here in this space. I name what I'm feeling, I name what I'm going through. I give words to what it is because once that's me taking my power. I call it out and then I can do something about it versus not saying anything about it. It stays stuck within me. And I had on my mind this morning just it was like something was begging, pleading, saying, please talk about internalized white supremacy and its effects and impact upon the white community in America. And I don't know why. It was just like nagging at me last night. And this morning I woke up with it. It's just like, please talk about this. And then there's the news of the shooting. And I'm just like, I'm recognizing that with the mass shootings that happen in America, we have made it possible to not care about the humanity of others. And that is a product of internalized white supremacy. Though maybe you and I did not create the systems that exist that have manipulated us for centuries, we have the responsibility to deal with how we feel about the trauma that was forced on us. So I'm going to use a couple of terms and then we'll talk a little bit more about it. First of all, when I'm saying white supremacy, what I'm referencing to, it's the belief that white people are superior to those of other races and therefore should dominate them. It's the belief that favors the maintenance and defense of any power and privilege held by white people. It has roots in what's now discredited doctrine of scientific racism and was a key justification of European colonialism. And this is just from Wikipedia. But really, it's this system of power and control to keep one group of people in control. And then you and I feel some kind of way about that. And I think that's what I need most from my white colleagues, friends, family, people who love me and people who hate me to really take a look at of how we feel about these systems that exist. How have we tried to strive against them, ignore, deny, or control them, and what it means to us? I think that the more introspective that we are around these things, the more change that we can create. Because there's another term I'm going to go with is generational trauma, and that's defined as the psychological effects of collective trauma that was experienced by a group of people that gets passed down to the next generation of that group. And we typically will talk about that through racism and slavery. We hear that all the time about generational trauma, but the impact on white people, um, we'll talk about child abuse or neglect or alcoholism as impacts on our family and we it gets passed down. But on the impact of white people, if you think about having to ignore if your ancestors had to ignore how they felt about keeping other people as property, and then the system of chattel slavery, which that's where it's not just where we're keeping people enslaved. Other systems of slavery, people could eventually they were like the products of losing a war, and sometimes could find their own freedom. Chattel slavery means, and that's for the individual. Chattel slavery means that if you are a slave, your children are slaves and your children's children are slaves. So it's this continued belief. So the ancestors of white folks who own property, slaves as property, they had to do something to ignore their feelings about what they were doing. I mean, you think about it, there were people who were sleeping with the enslaved women to create more children, which were treated as property to make more money. Your own children our property. So the kind of heart, the kind of thinking that had to be possible to just tune out the fact that I am beating, whipping, killing my own children. I'm selling them off. I'm separating families. I'm maiming and dismantling people. It's a lot to just pretend to ignore it. That means there's something inherent that white folks today are dealing with from their ancestors. And it got passed down, and this numbing out and ignoring it is just allowing it to continue. I think of the other things that are passed down that really just smacked me when I was looking at having to look at some of the history of racism in our country. There was Jim Crow, which were the laws of segregation. So once black people got out of slavery, now we're going to segregate everybody and say that black people can only go to these places. And what that meant, and in that period of Jim Crow, there were tons of lynchings where black people were being round up and hung for the smallest of crimes. But what's worse is what it must have meant for the white people and their families who brought their children, took them out of school to go see a lynching, to see a man be hung and have a picnic watching someone being hung. What kind of people was it that could say, "Hey, get me a souvenir. I might want an ear or a toe or a bone just to show that I was here." Now, that was the attitude of the time, and it wasn't just in the South. What kind of people do you come from? And it's okay. I give you 100% permission to look at the kind of people that you have come from and to feel some kind of way. Yes, it was the rules of the time, and no, I don't like it. But if we don't allow ourselves to say, no, I don't like it, we ball it up, we don't address it, we hide our feelings about it, then it rots and festers within us and it comes out through violence. It comes out through drug addiction. The opioid epidemic that we're having comes out through compulsive overeating, obesity in America. There's a reason for that. It comes out sideways because we're not allowing ourselves to feel how we really feel about situations. So, my invitation is for my white community members, whether you are a stalker, whether you are a supporter, whether you don't give a goddamn about me, to actually take the time to feel your feelings about your history and your heritage. And you don't have to like it. You don't have to like it. And just going through, there's Jim Crow, lynchings, the civil rights era of where black folks are trying to get the right to vote in this country. Then there's the crack epidemic where our government put drugs into black and brown communities to create addictions in these communities and then blame these people for taking the drugs. And then that leads over into mass incarceration, where black and brown people, thanks to the 13th Amendment, is it 13th Amendment? I can't remember. I'm so sorry. My folks are going to get me. But black and brown people are being rounded up and purposely sent to jail and getting higher sentencing rates than what white people would experience. So you get to feel some kind of way about that. And today, you and I are dealing with, in our generation, police brutality. We see the beatings of black and brown people on TV, but in general, the police are beating everybody, and that's just not okay. It's done because we don't know how to care for each other as human beings. And I'm just sick of it. I personally am absolutely sick of it. So that's why I made this video, because I know when my emotions are tense, I need to talk about what's bothering me. And then I can look at it and see, oh, this is what's going on. This is how I really feel. This is what I really need. What's the boundary or what's the communication that I need to create so that I can get my needs met in healthy ways? So, just summing up, I want you to be able to walk away from this Not thinking that, oh, Quinn is telling me that I'm racist. No, but that racism has had an impact on you. And you have a right to feel how you feel about it. It's okay to not like something that our parents or our grandparents did. We can still love Meemaw and all of her best recipes and the Christmas presents that she gave us, but we can also be able to say, I don't like the way that she talked about other people. Or I don't like how I was told to stuff down my feelings, have a stiff upper lip, when really I'm confused, upset, shocked, or angry about what's going on. I'm here for our liberation from trauma. That's what I'm here for. Me experiencing my PTSD as a Black woman, I hope that it becomes of service for everyone to liberate ourselves from the trauma that has been forced on us that we did not even ask for. We didn't ask for none of that, but it's in our lap and we've got to deal with it. Or we're going to continue to deal with the violence that we have of mass shootings and police brutality. So I hope that you take this as something to consider of how can you be fair, kind, and honest with yourself about how you really feel about what your white ancestors have done. And to remember that you are still worthwhile, you're still whole, you're still a human being, and to not let your humanity be taken from you by what your ancestors did. That's the chime. I gotta go. Till next time, peace.